Okay. Well, like I said, hello, everyone. I'm Emily Wallace. I'm a Grants and Contracts Administrator with the Office of Sponsored Programs. I'm joined today by my colleagues, Rachel Marr and Kathy Garrett, Grants Coordinators in OSP, along with Laura Birchfield, the Research and Graduate Education Outreach Coordinator. If you have questions throughout the seminar, feel free to enter those in the chat box and we will address them at the end of the seminar. Today's focus will be primarily on external grants, the types of funding, reasons for applying, and what the application process typically looks like. To get started, we'll take a quick poll of the audience just to see what your experience has been with grants to date. So when the question pops up on your screen, if you don't mind, please let us know, have you applied for grant funding in the past? And this could be internal or external. So let's see. So hopefully you see that.
Yes.
So have you applied for grant funding in the past? And this doesn't have to be recently. This could be, you know, you've applied for funding several years ago and you're trying to pursue new funding for a new project. So, yeah. So let's see, we kind of have a mixed set of results. So we have several who have pursued grant funding, whether it's internal or external funding, and several who haven't. So that's good to know. And honestly, even if it's been a while, it's good to have a refresher of new information. So we'll go ahead and get started. So the Office of Research and Creative Activity is split into two units. The Office of Sponsored Programs, which helps with the submission and administration of external grant and contract funding for research and other scholarly activity at WKU, and the Office of Research Integrity. And ORI helps faculty and staff navigate the IRB or IACUC process or other internal review processes for projects that involve either human subjects, animal subjects, biohazards, as well as other financial conflict of interest disclosures for externally funded projects. So we have, as part of the Office of Sponsored Programs, we have a few staff that are dedicated to pre-award services and a few that are dedicated to post-award. So Rachel, Kathy, and I are primarily pre-award. So we help faculty and staff search for funding, develop proposal budgets. We edit, review, and submit proposals on behalf of faculty and staff at WKU throughout the review process. Occasionally, program officers will send questions or need some clarification. So we work with principal investigators or project directors to make any requested changes or provide additional information during that review process. And then on the post-award side of sponsored programs, we have Regina Allen and Ryan Gregory, and they help negotiate and accept awards, create a financial chart of accounts for projects once they are awarded. If you need any changes throughout your award process, say maybe you need to make a change to your budget, you need more funding in materials and supplies than you needed in travel. Your travel ended up being less expensive than you anticipated, so you want to move some of your travel funds to materials. Well, our post-award ladies would help you with that budget modification process. And if, for instance, your project needed more time, usually grants and contracts are have a specific project period. And if you need to extend that project period, we would request sponsor approval for what's called a no-cost extension, saying that we don't need any more funding, but we need more time to actually accomplish what we proposed and said that we could do for whatever reason. And we've seen that some lately, especially with recent pandemic, but there are several different reasons people may need to extend their project for reasons that are really outside of their control. So we're here to help you navigate that pre-award and post-award process from proposal submission through the grant closeout process. So, grant lingo. I will say in the world of grants and contracts, there are several terms and acronyms. So please stop me if I use one without defining it and you'd like to know what it means. I have a few listed here that I'm just going to go through pretty quickly. The sponsor, if I use the word sponsor or agency, it's usually an entity or organization that provides funds for a specific project or activity. The sponsor may issue a call for proposals or a request for applications or request for proposals. A proposal is an application that's submitted to the sponsor, typically in response to a particular call or solicitation. The proposal outlines what you want to do, the proposed project, and it justifies the budgetary requirements to complete the project. An RFP is one of our most common acronyms. It is a request for proposals, also known as a funding opportunity announcement. This is the call, solicitation, guidelines for a particular program that a sponsor wishes to fund. So the RFP provides details on the deadlines, the eligibility requirements, proposal elements that they expect you to provide, the review process, the amount of funding that's provided through the program, et cetera, et cetera. The principal investigator or project director, this is also known as the PI or the PD. This is the individual who assumes full responsibility for the research study or the grant funded projects. We do have many grant programs that allow multiple PIs. So you may see PIs in different disciplines work on the same project, collaborate across campus or with different universities for projects that might have a larger scope or just require expertise in multiple areas. And then co-PI or other senior personnel. These individuals also have a role in the management of the project, but especially your key and senior personnel, they are not the primary or lead person. So they are not responsible for the overall decision-making or reporting aspects of the project. Even though today's focus is on external funding, I did want to take a moment to provide some internal opportunities because these could provide support for preliminary work that make you more competitive for external funding. So I've just listed a few of the programs that we either administer or encourage people to apply for. RCAP funding, or the Research and Creative Activities Program, provides support for faculty and instructors in all disciplines to develop or expand scholarly activities. And we do expect a new round of funding to be announced before Thanksgiving. Well, we expect to announce a deadline, I guess, before Thanksgiving. So keep an eye out for that. That should come via email, more information about upcoming deadlines for the next year and other project information. FUSE is the Faculty Undergraduate Student Engagement Program. That's a student-led research or creative activity project that requires a faculty mentor. So it's really student-driven, but it does have that faculty mentor to assist and help direct the student. It is an undergraduate program, and we do anticipate announcing a new round of funding by the end of the fall semester. So look for that by finals week. We should be getting that out for this year. So QTAG. So other departmental or college support, different colleges have different internal mechanisms, but QTAG is one that we know is kind of more of a campus-wide quick turnaround grant opportunity. So typically up to $3,000 each. And these are, as they sound, if you have a project that really has a quick turnaround, you need funding that you can't necessarily, it can't wait 3 to 6 months or however long it'll take for whether it's an RCAP or an external grant to get funded. You may be interested in pursuing a quick turnaround grant. If you do need funding ahead of FUSE, RCAP, or any other timelines that you find, check with your college. Those QTAG grants are administered at the college level. But they are a good opportunity to get some funding for preliminary work as well. So different funding mechanisms. Our office primarily works with grants, cooperative agreements, and contracts on this list. But a grant is conditional money provided or granted to carry out an approved project or activity. So grant funds are typically spent according to an approved budget, and any changes have to be approved by the sponsor. And so our office really helps to navigate that process. Cooperative agreements are legal agreements between typically the government and another entity. And in those cases, the government agency will have substantial either scientific or programmatic involvement in the project. So they don't just provide you money for the project that you've developed. They're really more involved in how that's executed. And a contract is a legal instrument defining a relationship between organizations where the PI, or sorry, the principal investigator provides either services or there's an acquisition of property to the sponsor. So it's a little bit different than a grant or cooperative agreement. It's more service or acquisition driven. And then gift funding. Gifts are money that is given in support of a project or a general effort with little to no restrictions or limitations on how you can spend the funding. Gift funding is received and administered at WKU through the Office of Philanthropy and Alumni Engagement. So if you have an interest in pursuing this type of funding, we do encourage you to reach out to philanthropy. And we do communicate with them on a regular basis. So if you find, for instance, a funding opportunity through a foundation and you're not really sure if it really fits like the grant or gift definition, feel free to reach out to us at proposal.development@wku.edu or sponsored.programs@wku.edu. And we are more than happy to help to communicate with philanthropy to make sure that that is we determine how that's best administered. So those are types of funding. Types of sponsors. These can vary. Federal agencies can include the National Science Foundation, National Endowment for the Humanities, and the National Institutes of Health, to name a few. State funding is provided directly through state offices, for instance, the Kentucky Department of Transportation. But sometimes you'll see on the slide, I have federal flow through and state flow through. Sometimes we receive what's called flow through funding, where the funding or support transfers from the original source through another agency before it reaches WKU. So as an example, we have several faculty who've received grants from the Kentucky NSF EBSCOR office, and they provide that grant funding throughout the state, but they ultimately receive that funding from the National Science Foundation. So it's really NSF funding that's flowing through the Kentucky NSF EBSCOR office to the university. So that's what you hear flow through. That's what we mean by that. Private foundation and international funding is also available through various corporations, family foundations, and other international sponsors. So when you're searching for funding, it is helpful to know that there may be several different types of sponsors who could be interested in funding your work. So if you're just looking at federal, maybe, and you're maybe having trouble finding programs, or you found just one or two that are good, it might be helpful to look at other sponsors or sources as well. So types of funding. Grant programs are provided for several different purposes. Some support research projects, while others will more specifically support student training, curriculum development, travel, purchase of equipment, visiting artists or other scholars. I do want to take one more poll of the audience to see which areas of interest are most applicable to your scholarly work. So if you have a second, please, when it pops up, please respond to the question to let us know what areas and types of funding you would need most. And please feel free, this should be a multi choice question, so feel free to select any and all that apply to your work. So if you need funding for research, curriculum development, and conferences or events, seminars, that kind of thing, feel free to let us know. A lot of different funding. This is great. Thank you, guys. I think I caught most people. So you should see, we do have a really broad range of needs among all of you who've attended today, which is great because we have resources that provide funding opportunities in all of these areas. So it's always good to know that we can help you find funding, even if you need equipment or you're looking in more of an artistic pursuit sort of area. So if you are interested in learning more about the funding resources we have and how to use them, we do, this is a shameless plug, we do have a seminar tomorrow. So I know several of you are registered for our funding introduction to funding searches seminar tomorrow. And if you haven't already registered, it's also on the link that you clicked on to register for this one. And if you would like to register or have any questions, feel free to let us know, but we will get into that in more detail. So, sorry, let me make sure. Yeah. So, reasons to write your grant proposal. As you consider external funding, it is good to consider possible reasons that you might even want to or need external funding. So you may be interested in accomplishing professional or career goals, build infrastructure in your lab or your department, or secure funds for travel to visit archives when funds are not otherwise available through your department or your college. So at a basic level, you might be trying to address even a need in the community or solve a problem within your specific field. Funding could be pursued to develop skills, increase publications, connect with others in the field, to, I guess, collaborate and accomplish research and creative projects, or honestly, all of the above. So there are several reasons you may be interested in pursuing external funding. But what is the worst reason to write a grant proposal? It's just for the money. Honestly, when reviewers look at your proposal and they see your budget, if what you're requesting does not really match what you intend to do, it will really show to reviewers. So what you request should match what you plan to do, and it should reflect the resources that you need. So no grant specifically allows unrestricted spending for personal use. A grant is money designated for a particular use with an approved and detailed budget. So just a little fun. So first steps, as you get started, it's good to focus your idea and ask yourself, what is the significance of the project? Why does this work matter? What is the anticipated project outcome? Who will be impacted or affected by the work, whether it's students, the university overall, university community, or society more broadly? Who are the people, places, and things involved in or impacted by the project? Does the project have a local scope, or does it have also regional or national impact? What are the short and long-term impacts of the project? Once you focus the idea, you can move from that concept to a planning stage and identify objectives and activities and develop more of the plan of work for the project. So objectives and activities are essentially the steps that you take toward accomplishing your goal, which include 3 to 4 obtainable goals. And usually those are stated in terms of outcomes. And you always want to tie your goals back to the need that you established when you honed in your project idea. You want to develop the plan of work. What are the methods and procedures to be used? Who's responsible for each step as part of the project team? Establish contact with collaborators and really work through that project management plan and determine what timeline is needed to accomplish the proposed work. And that's really good to know, because when you pursue a funding opportunity, many of them are limited. They might only have funding for 1 year or 1 to 3 years. And depending on the scope of your project, you may need more time than is allowed. So it's good to know the time that you need and whether your project is scalable, and if you could fund certain parts of it or do preliminary work with the funding that you're finding. So it's good to keep in mind. And then identify the support that you need to execute your plan. So, and that's in part assessing your existing resources and other assets, and then estimating the cost of executing the plan. And the cost minus the assets is what you need to support your project. So here we go. Contact OSP if you'd like to search for funding opportunities and begin the process, or join us tomorrow, or you're welcome to reach out to us anytime regardless. And we are happy to help you. So we do have several resources and tools available, and they are posted on the sponsored programs website. I've listed a few here. Our primary and I guess most comprehensive resource is Pivot. And Pivot is a database of over 28,000 funding opportunities from a variety of sources, including federal, private, and foundation sponsors. This resource provides abstracts from funded projects for several sponsors so that you can get an idea of what a fundable project would look like for a specific program. Pivot also contains searchable researcher profiles, which make it easier to connect with potential collaborators and other disciplines. Grants.gov on this list is kind of the home of all federal grant opportunities, and it's where we submit proposals to several federal agencies, including like the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Department of Education, and National Endowment for the Humanities. And then third on that list, we have SAM.gov, and SAM.gov is where we submit our annual federal contractor registration, but they also have a newer tool that is called Contract Opportunities. So it features any contract solicitations for federal agencies, so you can get on and search based on keywords for what maybe expertise, skills, or services that you could provide that federal agencies may be looking for. So we will be getting more into how to use these resources in tomorrow's seminar. So I will stop saying it, but please join us. So once you do find a funding opportunity that you are interested in pursuing, it is very essential to read through the guidelines closely. Programs often have very specific funding priorities, whether it's underrepresented students, undergraduate students, or graduate students. Work predominantly with rural populations, whatever it may be. A lot of programs will have specific areas that they want funded or highlighted, so it's good to know that when you get into it. And there are several areas and items to check for. Eligibility requirements, that's a really big one to check early and make sure that institutions of higher education are eligible to apply, or individuals or nonprofits, and make sure that it's not, eligibility is not restricted to certain areas. Some programs are, especially like small nonprofit organizations, may only fund work within their service area. And so especially when you're searching on Pivot, it's good to check and make sure that you don't find a program you really want to apply for and then find out that it's only eligible for individuals who are serving a county in California. And that's not where you plan to do your project. So it's good to keep in mind eligibility requirements. Also, the due date is really a good one to keep an eye on too. Know how much time you have to develop your proposal and when it's due. It's good also to know the expected number of awards. Some programs don't provide that information, but a lot of federal programs will tell you approximately how much funding is available, how many awards they intend to provide, and they'll give a minimum and maximum amount for each award typically. It's good to see what are the allowable costs. Some programs, for instance, will not allow tuition or foreign travel. So it's good to know when you're building your budget, first of all, not to ask for costs that we cannot be reimbursed for, but also that what you can ask for is what you really need to accomplish your project. What are the budget or project limitations, which kind of goes alongside if the project only provides $5,000 and you know you're going to need $500,000. Are you able to scale your project? Will that fund a part of it? How will that really help to meet the needs of at least part of your project goals? And is the university expected to provide matching support, also known as cost share? Good to keep in mind and look for as you're reviewing the guidelines. So federal sponsors do often list on their websites previous awardees for specific programs with a brief abstract from those funded projects. So if you do plan to reach out to a program officer for more information about those funded projects or proposals, feel free to let us know. We do have resources and can help navigate that process. Honestly, if you're applying to a program that we've had a lot of people apply to in the past, we may have already asked whatever questions you may have. So we're happy to help navigate that too. So I will start this off with the Office of Sponsored Programs does maintain a repository of proposals that have been funded by WKU faculty and staff WKU faculty and staff. So the PIs or principal investigators of these projects have agreed to share their work as examples. So that people who are applying to these programs for the first time or just aren't really familiar with them may see the types of content that's typically expected from these various proposal sections. So if you find a program you're interested in submitting a proposal to for a specific sponsor, you're welcome to contact us to see whether we have a successful application sample that you might be able to reference, just as an example. Obviously not to copy and paste, but just to see, it's good to see maybe the type of information that would be applicable and useful and expected for specific programs. So when we do look at proposals and the content that's expected for each of them, that does vary a lot by program. Some programs will just want an abstract, a narrative, and a bio sketch, and some of them will want all of these that are listed plus human subjects research sections and a data management plan and letters of support. So it does vary a lot depending on the program you're submitting to. But we have listed here several more common proposal pieces, ones that we see on a regular basis for the majority of programs that we apply to. So your abstract or specific aims would be a summary of your project goals, methods, and the potential significance of your project. And usually that is 1 page or less overall. Your project description or research strategy is also what it's called for some sponsors. That can range honestly from 3 to 30 pages long, depending on what program you're applying to, but often it does include a need statement or significance section. So you explain what is the need or what need is your project addressing, what is the potential impact of the project. And that goes back to where we focused on the idea. So you already have some of this outlined. This need statement contains the goals and objectives kind of toward the beginning of the narrative so that reviewers can pretty quickly see that project focus and expected outcomes from the project, kind of draw them in. There's also typically an innovation section of the project description or narrative, and that really touches on how your project is new or how the project will advance existing approaches to your research or other scholarly work. There's usually a research method or approach section, and that's really the strategy for data collection and analysis. And the research methods section would include a timeline typically and assigned tasks. So going back to that, who's doing what, as well as an evaluation and dissemination plan. So how are the results of your project going to be analyzed, disseminated, and how will individuals be able to access that data and benefit from it. The facilities, equipment, and other resources document is typically requested so that reviewers can see what resources are currently available to you. And that could be your lab space, office space, software, equipment, et cetera, just depending on what is relevant to the project you're planning to pursue. And also what institutional support is available. And so this does not mean like matching support, not like quantifiable, but more in terms of university, maybe departmental or administrative support like purchasing or maybe departmental office support that's available to help you manage the award. And that's really more of the non-tangible things that are harder to quantify, but they are real resources and helpful throughout the grant administration process. So the biographical sketch or CV, often we'll call that just a bio sketch for short. It is a snapshot of your education and professional history or just a brief abbreviated CV. Usually that ranges from 1 to 5 pages in length. Many sponsors do have their own format for that. So it's good to keep that in mind when you are looking at different programs, just to make sure that you're using the format or at least the sections that are required for the specific program that you're pursuing. So current and pending support. This is, like it says or sounds, it is a list of all current funding and all pending proposals that you are involved in. This typically includes requested or awarded amounts and the amount of committed effort, so that reviewers can see what other effort commitments you have and know that you have enough time to dedicate to this project and that you're not overcommitted with more than 100% effort with everything that you are currently working on. So there are often, like I was saying, some other documents that might be requested as supplementary documents, and that could be if you are doing human subjects research, some programs will require IRB approval. Some, especially if it requires a collaboration or work with community organizations, you may be required to provide letters of commitment or memorandums of understanding, etc. So the guidelines will specify what these other documents would be, but that is good to keep in mind. And your budget and justification are quite a big section of the proposal. It really gives the financial story of your proposal, and it does, I think I might have mentioned that it quickly shows whether you've followed the guidelines for allowable costs. So if you've included tuition and the guidelines clearly said that was not allowable, it's easy for the reviewers to see that you maybe didn't pay enough attention to allowable costs for the program. And we are here to help you navigate and review the guidelines and make sure that we don't budget unallowable costs because we don't want that to be a reason that that your proposal is rejected for something that we could have caught. So that's partly what we're here to help with too. But the budget and budget justification are often reviewed first. Most budgets will include direct and indirect costs. So direct costs include personnel salaries, fringe benefits, materials, travel, etc. Indirect costs are those that can't be really tangibly attributed to a single project. So like I said, that administrative support or facility usage or utility costs, that kind of thing. Indirect costs are calculated according to a federally negotiated rate. So this negotiated rate is included in each proposal budget unless the sponsor imposes a limit. So if they do limit indirect costs to 8% or they don't allow it, then we follow the program guidelines for that. Sponsored programs typically reviews the budget justification to help with appropriate language, especially with fringe rates and like indirect cost rate description. So we can help with the language of those sections as well. So when you're starting, with the budget, it is good going back to assessing your needs and available resources, and reach out to us and we'll be happy to help you build up that budget. So your total project cost is comprised of your direct costs, like we were saying, the personnel, fringe benefits, plus the indirect costs, also known as facilities and administrative costs. So if you've heard of F&A, that's what that would be, plus your cost share or your matching support. So cost share can be cash or in kind. And so cash might be your department is paying for some of your travel in the project, some field travel for field work. In-kind support might look like space on campus that's dedicated to this project. But cost share is matching support that is provided by the university or other sources. If you're working with community organizations, they may provide some resources that we could consider in-kind match for a project. But federal guidance does define cost share really as that portion of the project or program cost that's not borne by the sponsor. So whether it's the university or other sources providing matching support, we would consider that cost share. So some programs do require cost share, whether it's cash or in kind. Sometimes cost share is not required, but it can be provided on a voluntary basis. And we do generally discourage the inclusion of voluntary cost share since it commits resources that may otherwise have been needed for other purposes or could have met a requirement for a different grant program. But we do still apply to programs that require cost share. It's just something that we have to be aware of early on so that we can have discussions at department and college level of what resources are available to meet that need and meet that requirement. But that is cost share. So proposal submission. So you've drafted your proposal, now what? We do encourage peer review within your department. The pre-award team, so Rachel, Kathy, and myself, we will review for compliance with the guidelines and general formatting, but we are certainly not experts in all fields. We don't pretend to be. We do encourage you to reach out to your colleagues and get feedback from people within your field regarding the content and validity of the research. But check the deadline. It's always good to know how proposals are submitted, and most are submitted electronically, whether it's via email or through, like I said, grants.gov or another agency submission system. But there are still the occasional programs that require hard copy shipments of like 19 copies, one-sided in color. So it's good to know not only the deadline, but how is it submitted. And some of those are have postmark deadlines, but some of them have to be received by a certain deadline. So we just want to make sure we don't wait until the deadline and realize that it has to be shipped and it has to be received by that day. So give time for the internal approval process. Sponsored programs and the pre-award team will route proposal information and draft proposal materials through our web-based system. And it's called Spirit. So if you see any Spirit emails, that is us. But we do route that information to the PI, and the PI will fill out some compliance information so that we know, are there human subjects or animal subjects involved, biohazards? Is this a collaborative project? What are a few keywords for this project? And then the PI will approve and continue routing to their department head and associate dean or dean for approval. And really that allows the department head and dean or associate dean to review effort commitments, but also to know what the scope of the project that you are proposing to be funded. And to make sure, honestly, if we request support for equipment acquisition, do we have space for that equipment? Do we have the resources to maintain that equipment? So it's good to have that review and approval just to make sure everyone is aware and kind of checked it off along the way. Proposals are typically submitted by sponsored programs on behalf of the PI or principal investigator. If it's submitted via email, we do always copy the PI so that you know when it goes out. If the proposal is submitted through an electronic system, we will always follow up with a confirmation that your proposal has been submitted so that you know, and you're not out wondering where it is or if it's made it. So we always want to keep you updated, and we certainly don't submit a proposal until we know that you are confident that it's, ready to go. So we don't just take drafts and throw them in and send it out. We do work closely with PIs to make sure that any changes are made, and that everything is submitted in a timely manner in a way that looks as polished as we possibly can. So this is a snapshot of our internal timeline for external grant proposal submission. So this is not really a sponsor imposed timeline, but this is what the guidelines we generally go by when we work with faculty and staff to apply for programs. So when you do find a program that you'd like to apply to, please reach out to us at proposal.development@wku.edu. We will read through the guidelines and send a checklist of all required elements and other program information, as well as a timeline for proposal development. So it may be adjusted, the timeline, to allow enough time to collect collaborator information if you are working with someone at another organization. So like this shows, as soon as possible, as soon as you know you're going to submit, let us know what program you're going to apply to. Let us know if you have a link to the guidelines. We can start working on budget development, and sponsored programs will generate a checklist of all the required pieces. If you are working with someone at another institution, we ask for 3 weeks for contact information 3 weeks ahead of the deadline, so that we can reach out to your collaborators and say, please send us your budget and other materials that we need from them in order to finalize the overall project budget and incorporate all of their materials into the full application with enough time to submit by the deadline. And 7 days before the deadline, we'd like to have an internal budget finalized for the whole project and drafts of the proposal pieces sent to OSP for review. And we try to turn those around in a day or two, depending on other deadlines that we're working on, sometimes same day if we possibly can. But just to give you some feedback based on the guidelines to make sure that it's responsive to the call for proposals and not missing pieces or maybe suggestions for formatting. Sometimes programs require double spacing, and if you don't catch that, it can really throw off the amount of content you can provide. So we'll give feedback from content formatting following the guidelines. And then 5 days prior to the deadline, we do ask for a final draft of the proposal. And at that point, we will upload all of the pretty much final drafts into Spirit and start that institutional approval process. And that gives a few days before the deadline. And then the day before the deadline, we do ask for any final minor edits to proposal pieces, and that all approvals are completed by then. And that gives us a day to upload and do a final review and submit everything. And we always try to submit early. It's always best, because waiting until the day of the deadline leaves potential for technical issues that may not be resolved in time. And we certainly want to avoid that at all costs. So we do try to have everything ready to go the day before the deadline. So your proposal's been submitted. What happens now? Well, if you're awarded, congratulations. Sponsored Programs is here to help with the award negotiation and acceptance process, and that would be our post-award team. So Regina Allen and Ryan Gregory, as well as financial management, project execution. If you have questions about final reports, a lot of times that is detailed in your award document, as well as the closeout process. So if you're not funded, well, try again. Especially federal agencies will provide reviews, and if they're not automatically provided, it doesn't hurt to request reviews if they're available. It's always good to, if you do want to resubmit, make modifications in response to the review comments. And we are happy to help you either resubmit at a later deadline or find maybe other applicable opportunities that you may be interested in pursuing. So that is pretty much it as far as an intro to external funding. Like I said, if you have any questions or, need help at any point in the process, whether it is finding funding, applying for funding, or if you're a new faculty member and you're transferring an award, feel free to reach out to us at either sponsored.programs@wtu.edu. That is a shared email that everyone in our office will monitor, or proposal.development. And that is an email that the three of us, Kathy, Rachel, and I monitor on a regular basis for your pre-award questions. So either one will help direct you where you need to go, but feel free to reach out to us if you have questions or visit us. We do have more information on our website, which is listed here. There is a training and events page where we have some different information posted from past seminars and little short videos, more information as you get started with the grant process. So at this time, I guess we'll see if we have any questions in the chat box. Laura, do you mind to check our questions and see?
It doesn't look like we have any at this time.
Okay, good. Let me see.
Of course, if you all do, please just drop them in the chat. Or
yeah, and we can certainly give a few minutes if you do have any questions. Feel free to go ahead and type them away. And if they don't come to you now, and you wake up at 2 in the morning and you're like, oh man, what do I do in this case? Then obviously we'll be here tomorrow. So let us know if anything comes up later, and we'll be happy to help. So yeah. And for anyone who has registered for tomorrow's seminar, we look forward to seeing you then.
I don't see any questions through Emily.
I think we're pretty good, but thank you all for coming today. It was good to see you all. I know we're still virtual, but it's really good to see you all. And I saw a few requests for links, so we will certainly post those to the web, or this recording to the web, for anyone who may want to view it later or had to leave early. So but thank you all very much for being here, and hope you all have a